The night had sunk deep into the bones of the Kremlin. Outside, the snow fell in steady, whispering sheets, muffling the sounds of the city that never truly slept. Inside the walls of power, everything was still, except for the faint ticking of a gold-rimmed clock that marked each second like a metronome of fate. In a room lined with red velvet drapes and portraits of czars long dead, Vladimir Putin sat alone at the head of a long, polished mahogany table. A single lamp burned low, its light throwing his face into sharp relief, half shadow, half steel. His hands were clasped loosely in front of him, but his eyes, cold, calculating, betrayed the motion of a mind that never rested. A knock echoed softly. Without turning his head, he said, "Enter." The door opened with a muted creak, and Sergei Lavrov stepped inside, his overcoat still wet from the snow. Behind him, an aide carried a leather briefcase, the kind that held either state secrets or the fate of nations. Lavrov nodded once, his expression unreadable, and took the seat to Putin's right. "The Americans have confirmed," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "Trump has agreed to the terms. The announcement will come in 48 hours. Putin did not respond immediately. He continued to stare at the reflection of the lamp in the table's surface, a small golden sun quivering in the dark wood. 48 hours, he repeated finally, as if testing the sound of it. And in exchange, Lavrov leaned forward slightly. Ukraine is off the table. The White House will quietly scale back support, financially, militarily, diplomatically. They'll call it strategic recalibration. A thin smile tugged at the corner of Putin's mouth, the kind that never reached his eyes. Strategic recalibration, he said softly, almost amused. They always have such pretty words for surrender. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. The lamplight caught the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the map of decades spent playing the longest game in the world. For a moment, silence filled the room, thick as the snow outside. Then he spoke again, almost to himself. "You see, Sergei, the West never learns. They think power is a handshake, a signature, a treaty. But power," he tapped a finger lightly on the table, "power is patience." Lavrov nodded, though he knew the remark required no agreement. Putin rose from his seat and walked to the tall window overlooking the Kremlin courtyard. The glass was fogged with the warmth of the room, and beyond it, the city lay blanketed in white. The spires of St. Basil's Cathedral glowed faintly in the distance, a ghostly mirage of color against the night. He spoke without turning around. "Trump believes he's playing me. He thinks this deal will make him the man who brought peace back to Europe. He wants the headlines, the photographs, the applause. But what he doesn't understand is that peace, as he imagines it, is my greatest weapon." Lavrov hesitated. "And what of Europe? They'll protest. The Germans, the French. They'll bark," Putin interrupted. "But they won't bite. Not without Washington's leash. And Washington," he said, turning back with a faint smirk, "is about to loosen it." He walked slowly back to the table and placed his hand on the briefcase that Lavrov's aide had set down. The leather was worn, the brass clasps gleaming under the dim light. With a soft click, he opened it. Inside were folders stamped with seals from ministries across the Federation, Defense, Energy, Foreign Affairs. Documents filled with plans that stretched years into the future, each one a thread in a tapestry of control. He flipped through them silently, stopping on a single sheet marked with a red tab. "Phase 2 begins once the Americans withdraw their funding," he said, glancing up. "We'll move our assets through intermediaries. No direct involvement, no fingerprints. By the time they realize what's happening, the territories will be ours in everything but name." Lavrov exhaled slowly. "And the sanctions?" Putin closed the briefcase with a soft thud. "Sanctions are weapons for men who've already lost the war." He returned to his seat, eyes flicking once more to the clock on the wall. The second hand swept forward with mechanical precision. "Time," he said quietly. "That's the only currency that never devalues." The door opened again, and a young officer entered, his uniform immaculate, his expression tense. "Mr. President," he said, standing at attention. "We have confirmation, the signal from Geneva came through." Putin's gaze sharpened. "Good. Tell them to proceed." The officer nodded briskly and left, the door shutting softly behind him. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking clock and the faint hum of the heating vents. Lavrov studied him carefully. "You've set this in motion for years," he said, almost in admiration. "And yet, it still surprises me how easily the pieces fall into place." Putin's smile returned, cold and precise. "That's because I don't push the pieces," he said. "I let them think they're moving on their own." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes glinting under the lamplight. "Trump thinks he's winning. That's his weakness, he needs victory the way other men need air. He'll trade anything for it. Even allies. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the city, a strange sound for a winter night, low and distant, as if the heavens themselves were murmuring in disapproval. Putin rose once more and approached the map that hung on the far wall, a sprawling chart of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. His fingers traced the lines of borders, rivers, and pipelines. When they reached Ukraine, he paused. Do you remember what I told you in 2014? He asked. Lavrov's voice was steady. You said borders are written in pencil. Putin nodded. Exactly. And pencils, he said, glancing over his shoulder with that faint, knowing smile, can always be erased. For a long time, neither man spoke. The air felt heavy, as though the walls themselves held their breath. Then, from somewhere deep in the Kremlin, the bells began to chime midnight. Each toll echoed through the corridors, slow and deliberate, a reminder that history was always being written, quietly, relentlessly, often in rooms just like this one. Putin stood still until the last chime faded. Then he turned off the lamp, plunging the room into shadow. Only the faint reflection of snowlight from outside remained, catching the glint of his eyes. History rewards the patient, he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. And tonight, it begins again. The snow outside thickened, swirling through the Moscow night. Inside, the clock ticked on.